Okay, this is Austin from Chernobyl, Blazing Eye,
Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, Blazing Eye, Hate Preacher, and 7th Street Punks Warehouse Space. All right, let's start this interview. You've been in the scene for a long time, and one time when you were younger, you were involved. You were, from what I understand, you were heavily involved with animal rights movement, and you even traveled all the way to Portland just to go to the protests. And you were working with all this different organization and stuff. I'd just like to know what happened now and why'd you got out of it.
I think from when I started doing all that stuff, it evolved. I mean, I was younger and more passionate about animal rights kind of issues and supporting the Zapatistas and the EZLN and just like different stuff, going to police brutality marches every year. I mean, a lot of that came about because of the music that I was listening to, or even your fanzine. When I was younger, I got like an issue when I went to Melrose, probably at like Tang Records or something. So I was able to learn about a lot of that stuff, and then I got interested in activism. I don't know. I mean, it evolved from doing activism to some community organizing stuff. I don't know, we did Food Not Bombs, we did a lot of different things. I think over time I started to connect a lot of different struggles or different issues going on or different identity stuff as all being part of the same path, you know? I think when I was younger, it was a lot of times you get really focused on one issue or like a single issue kind of politic. But yeah, I think as I like grew older, I started getting more into stuff that had to do with the prison industrial complex.
Also, at that time, even your group of friends you had with the whole activist scene was different. I didn't mostly hang out with your group of friends and stuff. But I thought mostly because a lot of your friends went to jail, or I'm not gonna mention names. A couple of them who are out of the scene, who became snitches or FBI informant and stuff. Well, I thought it was because of that. Because it was dangerous. Some of the crowds you hang out with. I think that a lot of us, unfortunately,
I don't know, we kind of, everyone was mostly really young and inexperienced with different stuff. And in the same way that like, I remember, it makes me think of the Weather Underground documentary and how a lot of those kids, I'm not going to say that me and everybody that I was with at that time didn't grow up around different kinds of violence at times, but I think that everyone was really kind of psyching themselves into a place where they were playing revolutionary and as opposed to really, I don't know, everyone had a lot of anger. So a lot of stuff that we were doing started to revolve around causing, or I don't know, it seemed like the basis of like where we were coming from was more around anger and a lack of power or like urgency. And it didn't mean that I guess it meant that we didn't have a good strategy or we didn't have a good understanding about things. I think as I'm older, I'm not really attached to a group, or I don't identify with a particular ideology. Like, I'm inspired by a lot of different things, but like every kind of idea, if it comes from human beings, it's flawed. You know, it has its positives and its negatives. So I'm more, I guess, agnostic politically, if that makes sense. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'm more about creating stuff than tearing stuff down. Whereas when we were younger, we were like fighting everybody and everything, even down to like me causing problems around people's eating meat, whatever it is. I think that it's a thing that you kind of have to meet people where they're at. You can't act like an asshole and claim to be into radical politics.
You're involved with a lot of music now, but a lot of this generation of the music scene, they don't know that you used to be a community organizer, and you also did critical resistance. Can you give us a little information about that and the community organizing you did, and why did you got out of all that too as well? You used to do that full time,
Well,
community organizing, critical resistance.
I found out about critical resistance through the Chuco's Justice Center, which was or is, I haven't reconnected for years, but a charter school. A lot of the kids that are kind of kept being pushed out of like the school system or kind of put on track to,
Yes,
I don't know, a
YJC.
tightrope. Yeah, like it was a youth organization that like worked around like building a charter school for all the kids that seemed to be thrown away in whatever institutions. And so I would go there and volunteer. I think we did Cop Watch group out of there. It was like a little network we did, and based on what kind of neighborhood you live, or what neighborhood you lived in, you would organize chapters or little groups to watch the police or, you know, monitor police activity in your neighborhood. Like if you lived in Boyle Heights area, then you found a crew of people from there. So, and then Critical Resistance had an office out of that space. I threw punk shows out of that spot in the mid 2000s. And when they had a job opening for a lead organizer position, I applied and eventually got that job. So, I mean, it was kind of the first organization or activist job where it was actually something that was like a part of the nonprofit thing. And I did like grant writing, and I helped to lead different projects from like digital tourist storytelling for girls and women coming out of prisons and jails that were in this particular, I guess, halfway home, or I don't know the proper term, called A New Way of Life in South LA. There was like political education workshops and, I don't know, co-counseling stuff. I mean, our chapter also fought prison and jail and cage expansion on a legislative level too. I like working with the group a lot, but I struggled a lot with like mental health stuff that I didn't really understand totally until I was a little older. So I think towards the end of that job, it was like super stressful because it was a lot of work. It was a weird dynamic of LA, or all the chapters being volunteer based, but having a paid position, of which I was in. I don't know. I think I just struggled with a lot of that responsibility and depression and stuff like that. So I think it was, I mean, I had a lot of support in that job. There's a lot of amazing people that I met and campaigns that I worked on, or different stuff. But yeah, I think after that I kind of took a break. I got disillusioned or needed a new direction with myself. I kind of started just focusing on music more after that.
That's good.
I mean, I'm jumping around a lot, but yeah. But I mean, the thing that I think is really important about critical resistance is the politics of abolition. I think that's something that sharpens anybody, regardless if they identify as like a socialist or an anarchist or nothing. It's kind of a thing where it's like, how do you deal with harm that happens between people without relying on courts or prisons or systems of punishment? How do you like genuinely create safer communities that don't rely on the prison industrial complex? So I mean, that to me still sticks with me, even if I'm not like a card-carrying member of a group or anything else. It's just like the people, especially in the punk scene that I'm in now, it's like most everybody is impacted by police and prisons, their families, and deportation and immigration, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the work that I've done, even though I don't wear it on my sleeve or make all these big statements when I'm on stage with a band or do any writing or something. Like when I'm booking shows or running stuff here, doing stuff, I'm trying to do the best I can to be creative with the ways that I intervene when there's situations going down. And I learned a lot of that from critical resistance.
Speaking of music, let's talk about the music scene in the 90s. Can you tell us about how the punk shows were in the 90s when you were a kid, when you were going, or how the anarchist gatherings you've been to were like?
I mean, there was definitely different stuff going on.
What was the
a lot of
difference
the
there?
clubs that I would go to were usually all ages because I wasn't 21 in the 90s. I didn't go to backyard shows as often or as much, but a lot of them were at community centers or spaces like Coos Cafe. I mean, you had the same things happening at the same time. There were different vibes going on. The PCH club was a little more, a little less overtly political, even though they were friendly to peace punk shows or whatever you would call it. Coos Cafe had more of like a community-oriented vibe. There would be the shows that, you know, you would throw, or the people that are all day long and included like free vegetarian meals and different organizations that didn't always agree with each other, but you know, it wasn't, I mean, whatever, I could say this a lot. It obviously wasn't a time when the internet was a big thing, so you really had to go out and meet people and pick up whatever they had to represent their idea, their group, their campaign, or it was just young kids distroing punk music, you know, or printing patches and selling stuff. I don't know. I always kind of liked swap meets since I was little, and trades and people that hustled stuff. So it was kind of cool to see a mixture of different ideas that you could check out and see if there's something you wanted to do, or if certain campaigns or stuff that people were doing spoke to you, or if you were just checking out underground music. But yeah, I feel like those kind of shows, they had bands, they had speakers, they had poetry, workshops, sometimes like live theater. I don't know, it was just like a different thing. I don't think that happens as often anymore.
What happened now? So, because back then, you know, you go to a show, you get $5 show, watch 6 bands, you get free vegetarian meal by Food Not Bombs. You see speakers between bands, poets, and you see all kinds of literatures, tabling. What happened? Why is it changed now, though?
I don't know. I think social media changed a lot of shit, for sure. I don't know that people, I don't feel like they need to go out and be in real time with each other, or real spaces, and interact and have to, you know, I think everybody kind of figures out a way to like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just different. It's a different time. Plus, a lot of those politics or those slogans or some of those ideas don't always have a timelessness to them. It was what made sense at that time, and right now, it takes something else. It's different. I don't know. People also kind of, their priorities are shifted around. I mean, people are still surviving if that's where they're at, or working, or whatever, living off of their parents, or whatever place people are coming from. But it doesn't seem like, I don't know, at least in punk, there's consciousness to it, but it's not explicitly political anymore, I don't think. It's more about like music and songwriting and art, and I don't know. I mean, there's a lot for people to sing about and talk about, but I don't really know. Right now, it seems like people are just very into the culture and about punk stuff itself. So it's like people are record collecting, people are looking for obscure bands from countries back in their 80s or 70s that no one's ever heard, and that's an important thing to people, is to like show on their sleeve, like, I have lots of musical knowledge. I know about a lot of punk bands that are below the surface of like what people know, you know, or are mostly familiar with. It seems like, and then yeah, there's the way a lot of people are, I don't know, looking for validation through social media.
Yeah, speaking of social media, before social media got big, you also played as a second guitarist on the Resist and Exist album, and the label at that time even like did a pay for all the recording, did the driving. But I mean, not just Resist and Exist, all the bands back then. You know, even 7-inch, when the label pressed it, they print like 5,000, and they pay for all the recordings. Do you think due to social media, all the like the sales of the records and everything went down because people could download it for free now?
Yeah, I guess that's gonna be true for certain bands and certain artists, which I guess is a good or a bad thing. I don't really know. I mean, I'm not that impressed by a lot of stuff.
Because I was shocked when you
So
told
like,
me.
it's cool to
right.
see more people putting out their own music or recording their own music. It's a lot cheaper, or just you can put stuff together and instantly the world can see it without having to send tapes everywhere and wait
Right.
for reviews and have people physically order stuff. But I don't know, it's things seem more disposable, or like people will, I don't know, if I really hear something that I like, I'll track down the record because I want to own it, because I really believe in the band, or I get obsessed with the songs or the music or the art of the lyrics or all of it. But I don't know, I think a lot of times if bands aren't selling as much, it's because they're not putting enough attention and time and detail into all those pieces.
Do you think it's hard for bands now because they have to front all the recording, they have to front all the tour?
That's
back
easier
then,
to do all
labels
that
used
stuff.
to DIY labels used to pay for everything though.
It's easier to do that stuff. I think people just think that it's that it's just because it's easier because of the technology or the tools of communication being quicker, that they expect everything to be, I don't know, like you still have to do relationship building. Like, you can make a demo and you can like message a bunch of people at once and set up a whole West Coast thing in like a day or a half hour maybe. But it's still hard because I don't know, with punk there is still somewhat of a network, and like people won't, I don't know, people need to really like what you're doing musically, or need to connect with something to be excited about it, or they have to have known you or met you or you've been vouched for by somebody else. There's still like connections that need to be made, you know?
Right.
So it's like, even though it's easier to communicate and do all this stuff, you might not, it might take some time, unless you have a friend's band that's already been through that state or that city, to figure out who's gonna help you and who's gonna book a show for you there, and who's gonna give you a floor to sleep on, or,
And
you know, it's still about relationships. And if you have a bad reputation, or are not so friendly, or I don't really know. I mean, there's just things that you're not gonna have as many doors